What's a scientific fact that creeps you out? The brain can play tricks on you. When you look at a clock and the second hand seems to freeze for a moment, your brain is actually generating a false memory, and your perception of time stretches slightly backward. This effect is called chronostasis. That so many vegetables came from the same plant. Broccoli, kale, kohlrabi, Brussels sprouts, cabbage, etc. They are, botanically speaking, the same species. Humans have just bred them to emphasize different traits, buds, leaves, tubers. Imagine if humans were as genetically flexible. Imagine a person walking around with giant toes, but otherwise normal. Actually, plant genetics in general is a weird world. Because of some pesticides used, roaches won't go anywhere near a meth lab. Edit. Didn't expect this much after reading some RPF. For those you are asking, meth labs have been known to produce toxic gas, like phosphine, which a common insecticide. Phosphine is often used in silos to deal with vermins. Some mutations of just one letter in the DNA code can kill the fetus almost instantly, but some people live and have a seemingly healthy life while missing a whole chromosome. If you understand anything about biology, that's completely wild. Your brain literally creates your own reality and your senses and body just go along with it. Caterpillars turn completely into goo in their cocoon, and then become a butterfly. Edit. This blew up. According to my inbox, many people have been creeped out. A good day's work. Parasites can live anywhere inside of you. For years unnoticed, a simple migraine could be a tapeworm crawling in your brain, causing damage. Your eyes begin to blur frequently and you don't know why, and it's not getting better. Losing weight and having diarrhea, but it's not a stomach bug. Well, I guess it is. You are having a difficult time catching your breath and your chest doesn't feel right. It could just be some parasite hanging out, using you. The first eye that can successfully pass the Turing test would be able to pretend that it couldn't. That as the permafrost melts, a lot of locked up methane will be released, and microorganisms there will wake up and do their jobs, breaking down organic matter, and release more methane and greenhouse gases. You get and cure cancer in your own body thousands of times a day. A fever is your body way of saying, we don't negotiate with terrorists. We either destroy the enemy or we die with them. Your brain is making decisions before you are even aware of the decisions it has made. It also makes decisions based off of learned behavior and you just go along with it. The sudden urge to jump off of a very high height. You can be physically and mentally stable to the greatest degree and still have this feeling when at such a high height. A gamma ray burst could wipe out all life on Earth instantly with no warning. Obligate siblicide. In some species of animals, multiple offspring are born but only one is actually raised by the mother. The others are born only as backup in case the firstborn doesn't survive. When the firstborn is fine, which is the typical case, it kills the others. There is more microorganisms on your body than people on Earth. That the only reason you are a functional human is that your DNA is so tangled that entire sections can't get decoded and screw it up. Edit. Turns out I must have majorly misunderstood something as this is very wrong. Thanks Reddit, but as far as I'm aware the brain fact is true though. Thinking about how breathing and lungs work freaks me out. Once I start thinking about it, all I can think about is my breathing and then I have to force myself to stop thinking about it. Just how big of a number a mole actually is. Doctors, scientists are barely keeping up with the influenza virus. It keeps on mutating rapidly. It really wants to get inside you. Most of the water on the earth will rain down at some point. The crappy fact about this is that the human body is 60% water, meaning that at some point the same water that runs throughout your body, the one on your blood, bones, brain, etc., will rain down at some point. After being decapitated, there's still few seconds of brain activity that happen before you snuff out. It's rare, but you can die at any moment for literally no reason at all. Your body just stops working. We know more about the moon than we do our own oceans. the existence of prawns. That there are little crab-like things crawling on your face. Edit. Not sure why this has a wholesome award, but hey, that's awesome. Thanks. When the Titanic sank, none of the shoes decomposed, so there's ton of shoes at the bottom of the ocean. Honestly, nothing is more creepy than how deep sea anglerfish mate. The deep sea is dark, and the anglerfish are spread very thinly. Therefore, when an anglerfish meets another anglerfish, it's incredibly important they get the chance to mate over and over again. The evolutionary strategy that deep sea anglerfish devise is extra creepy. The male latches onto the female, biting her and never letting go. That way he can inseminate the eggs she drops. Not that bad so far, right? But wait. How does he eat if he's latched on his mate? Well, the circulatory system's fuse and the female provides nutrients for the male through this fused circulatory system. The true horror starts here. The organs of male start to wither and atrophy, being absorbed into the female. Eventually, the male is reduced to a lump of testicles the females use to fertilize their eggs. Females are often covered in bumps of several males that have melted into the female, becoming a literal body horror lump of meat on the female. The way quantum mechanics works is pretty creepy to me for reasons I can't exactly pin down. Particles aren't points, at least not that we can possibly ever observe. The best physical description of a particle's position is a wave over at least a 4-dimensional volume showing where it probably is. I say 4-dimensional because there's a non-zero time uncertainty as well. This isn't a limitation on what we can observe. It's an actual testable property of particles, that they don't have exact positions, velocities, energies, times. When they're observed by interaction, the wave collapses, which still doesn't make it exact, just more likely to exist in a smaller space. The argument that there really is an exact point in there somewhere and it's just always hidden from observation isn't true. The Bell inequality proved that. For example, because of this uncertainty, it's physically impossible to cool helium enough to freeze it at atmospheric pressure. This uncertainty even applies to the vacuum. It can't be at zero energy, because that would violate the uncertainty principle. So sets of virtual particles pop into existence in the vacuum and stick around for an incredibly short amount of time, given by the time uncertainty, before annihilating each other in a zero net energy process. This is, very simply put, how black holes hypothetically lose mass. Pairs of virtual particles are spontaneously created near the event horizon. One enters, one escapes. The one inside annihilates a particle within. The one that leaves becomes real. Information is transported outside the event horizon in an incredibly obfuscated, but still existent, form, meaning information isn't destroyed by black holes. Then you get into the weird math. It starts raising questions about what real is. Can we say something's real if it's not testable? Or is the math describing the situation the closest to real that we can get? For example, you could look at the predicted path for a particle. There's a non-zero chance for it to take any path between 2 points. So you basically take all the possible paths, account for the probability that it takes that path, add them all up, and you can recover Newtonian mechanics from it in the classical limit. Is this actually what's happening? It isn't really testable. Even the Bell inequality that I mentioned earlier has some crazy philosophical implications. It basically says one of 3 things are true. Information travels faster than light, which we have never seen. Cause doesn't always come before effect, WTF. Or the universe is super deterministic, which would disprove free will. We don't know which. People make a lot of crazy claims based on quantum mechanics. And I think a lot of it has to do with how uncomfortable the idea of living in a universe that seems to be inherently uncertain is. Years ago I saw an episode of A Monsters Inside Me where this guy was doing something outside and a fly flew into his eye. It only made contact for about a microsecond, but it was enough time for it to lay eggs. After they hatched they started eating his eye from the inside and he was starting to go blind until a doctor figured out what was wrong. Just imagine that. Getting your eye eaten from the inside and losing your sight all because a fly very briefly made contact with you. Ever since I learned about this I get really paranoid when there is a fly around my face because of the fact that this could possibly happen to me. A buddy of mine is a pilot for a major airline, in top 3 of airlines. I asked him exactly how much flying are you actually doing during a flight, like how much are you controlling the plane? He said about 5%. 0.95% of a flight is completely automated. He said he's involved a little bit on takeoff and on the landing, but for the most part the plane flies itself unless something major happens in flight. A doctor once told me, on average every human has 3 anomalies. Not all are visible. Apparently, the following statement creeps others out. Your bones are wet. The sun will eventually die out. There is something called the squeeze, where when people had old scuba suits with tubes, you could actually get sucked into that tube if the pressure was off. You are literally shredded through your own breathing tube. The mantis shrimp can see colors that our eyes aren't capable of perceiving. Think about that. What else are we just not capable of sensing? Your skeleton isn't inside of you. You're inside of your skeleton. The average number of legs for the human population is less than 2. That Stephen Hawking died the day before we got the first picture of a black hole. That's just a special sort of cruelty to live so long with such a lethal disease only to die right before seeing solid proof of your life's work. Edit. It was correctly pointed out that I had my dates wrong. Stephen Hawking did indeed die sooner than only a day prior to the photo. Also, I never said that he came up with black holes. Please don't strawman my comments to create a bullet Reddit witch hunt. All the same, the spirit and sentiment remains true. It sucks that a great scientist lived far into a lethal disease only to die shortly before the image of what he worked his entire life on had a visual image. Christ, some of y'all are way too obsessed with internet fame. If you believe strongly enough that you have been cursed, your brain can shut itself off entirely in severe cases. The psychological term for it is voodoo death syndrome. It's just the fact you can literally think yourself to death that unsettles me so. Not exactly scientific or creepy, but it's close enough and I want to contribute. Mouth pipetting was a thing in labs in the 1980s. A pipette is, for simplicity's sake, a glass straw that lab staff would use to transfer liquids. Nowadays we use special bulbs that when squeezed would suck up the liquid for us, kinda like a turkey baster or eyedropper. Before we had these bulbs, lab workers had to use their mouths to suck up the liquid, which meant if they weren't careful they'd get whatever they were sucking up in their mouth. I'm currently training to be MLAT and those fluids would usually be urine, liquid stool, sputum and so on. Edit. So mouth pipetting is still a thing. I'm Canadian and I've been told that it is rare or non-existent in our labs. If the magnetism between protons and electrons weakens a tiny bit, matter disintegrates like a Thanos snapping his fingers. There is a supermassive star 7,600 light years away named Eta Carinae. It is about 200 times the mass of our sun. Its size is about the size of our entire solar system. It is 5 million times brighter than our sun. And it is very near supernova. It might have already happened and the shock wave is on the way. It probably is far enough away to where it won't destroy our solar system. Probably. That there is really no such thing as a permanent scientific fact. I'm pretty sure scientific fact is a bit of an oxymoron. Science always leaves room for an improvement on a theory. That being said, where TF is the 95% of the mass of the universe at, why can't we find it? That just because a planet has the properties to sustain life, the probability of life evolving are still extremely rare, exponentially so for intelligent life. There are an estimated 36 intelligent civilizations in the Milky Way, but they are so far away we wouldn't have had the chance to communicate with them. Due to relativity, it is impossible to measure the speed of light in a straight line. The only way we've measured it is by round trip with mirrors. For all we know, it could be instantaneous going one way, and half the speed of light in the other, and it would be impossible to tell. I could be drinking the same water that my extremely far relative drank back in like the 1800s. I had a professor in college who said that if you weren't terrified by the concept of entropy, you didn't fully understand it. Scientific? Maybe not, but I always think about, unless you are mega famous, or made an insane contribution to society, You and everything you've ever said or done will or accomplished will be forgotten. In time, after you die, you will gradually be forgotten by your family and friends. Every shared experiences with friends or family will be forgotten and lost because you will die and your friends will die, your family will die. No one will exist anymore to share or talk about your memories. Your kid will remember you, and maybe your kids' kids, but those kids' won't. And on forever you will be phased out of existence. Honestly, how long do you think memories of you will carry on through future generations unless you were mega famous for something? Basically the entirety of pregnancy, childbirth. Like, this other living organism embeds itself in the lining of my uterus, feeds off my blood, makes me grow an entirely new organ, the placenta, just to protect it while it grows. Then it comes out while basically still gestating. Other mammals' babies can walk and run within minutes of birth. Ours can't even hold up their giant domes, just because the hole I have to push it through won't be big enough for its head if it stays in any longer. Oh. And once I've done all that I get to have the longest and worst period of my life while my uterus sheds out 40 weeks of uterine lining. I've had a kid and it still ducks me up. The grand scale and size of the universe never fails to instill Lovecraftian anxiety in me. If you rub garlic on your feet you can taste it. Edit. Thanks everyone for upvoting this. I'm new to Reddit and don't know too much, so it's nice to know that it's supportive. OA. Humans are bioluminescent. Nothing to do with body temperature. We emit visible light that can be photographed in specific conditions. But this light isn't visible to us, which makes it a strange thing to have evolved, and begs the question, what organisms is this light visible to? And why? Edit. Adding an edit for all the comments explaining evolution. Please read the thread before commenting. I find this a creepy fact due to implications on interspecific relationships. Not because I think prehistoric humans went shopping for a bioluminescent hat with a specific motive in mind. Rogue black holes. There are black holes that just are floating around in space and potentially ducking up solar system just by passing through it. Edit. I suck at spelling. Rogue, not rouge. We could be smashed from space at any time. The Earth formed, cooled and started existing. Then about 4 billion years ago, it was pelted by more space rocks until the surface melted again. The late heavy bombardment. If that happened again, the only remaining evidence that we ever existed would be our deep space probes, Voyager, etc. Literally everything that you know or feel or experience in total is just a series of electric impulses and nothing else. When you go to get something from one room, or upstairs, and suddenly forget why you went in there, it's called a boundary event. Usually, if you go back to where you started, through the boundary, you'll remember it again. The universe is unbelievably infinite, while simultaneously unbelievably infinitesimal. The universe has 10 circumflex 22 stars. A rough guess. This is an unfathomably large number for humans to comprehend. But bear with me. There is roughly 100,000 million stars in our galaxy alone. And there are roughly 125 billion galaxies. A single drop of water contains 10 circumflex 21 H2O molecules. Not too far off from the number of stars in the whole universe. A very similar number, but contained in a single drop of water. It blows my mind that the universe can contain such mind-boggling numbers of things on such wildly different scales. There is so much to reality that the human mind just isn't capable of grasping. Out of all our DNA, only 2% codes for our genes. The 98% left over is called junk DNA. I'm not specialized in genetic, but it was long thought to be useless, but it's apparently essential for DNA expression regulation and protein formation. There are familial forms of Alzheimer's disease. They are very rare, but they exist. It doesn't skip a generation, and one of the form makes you have the disease as early as your late 20s, early 30s. In Auschwitz, Joseph Mengele, Nazi doctor who conducted experiment on twins, sewed up 2 twins together for its and giggles and let them die after the surgery of infections. They apparently screamed of pain for days until dying. You can live normally with half your brain removed. It's usually done on young children suffering from terrifying epilepsy, and the surgery is the last resort. It works quite well, and if done early enough, with re-education, The children develop normally without cognitive deficit. They just are blind from one eye, have one very weak arm leg, but they are not cognitively affected. Some go to college, get married, have children and live completely normal lives. That all of the COVID-19 virus that exists and has killed millions would fit inside a Coke can. You can be convinced you committed a crime. You can also give false confessions. We don't have free will. We have free won't. Every emotion and thought that comes up is not under our control. We can only control how we respond. Along with this, our brain also sets actions up before we even consciously think them, allowing neurologists to predict our actions before we even do them. We only have solid knowledge on about 10-15% of the ocean. There's no real reason that we, or any animal for that matter, have to process time at the speed at which we do. Intelligent species in other galaxies, solar systems, would very likely process time at an entirely different rate. Sea stars eject their stomachs to cover edible parts of their prey, begin digesting it externally, and then pull the partially digested prey into digestive glands to finish the job. Starfish feeding mechanism, edited for continuity grammar. At the quantum level, there is no matter, only electrical charges. Matter is only energy of a specific temperature and frequency. The fact that we exist. Nothing will make you special because 1000 years from now probably no one will know you. That the photons and electrons act differently when there is an observer. How many other living things are on you and in you every second? Not so much as a fact but an observation. Viruses are both dead, alive, and inanimate all at the same time. We still don't know why or how they originally came into existence in the first place, and theoretically, the only possible function they serve in any species, especially humans, is solely to cap the population growth rate. Therefore, nature, in all its nihilistic behavior, made a thing to destroy life itself by making it a byproduct of too much life according to unexplained forces in nature. Air bubbles in your heart, the existence of tapeworms. When a president declares a national state of emergency, the law prohibiting medical experiments on unwilling human subjects is suspended. There is a fungus that turns us into zombies, and when they die it will be in the best position to spread more of the spores. No one knows how anesthesia works. They know what it does but we don't know how. Very scary thought when going under the knife. The mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. Violets secrete a chemical that causes you to forget what they smell like afterwards. You're essentially getting roofied every time you sniff one. Every day, we're being pulled closer and closer towards something we can't see, and you might think it's just Earth. It's not. All of the observable galaxies are moving towards it, which means the mass of this thing is so great that it outweighs multiple galaxies. Shudder.